I've been collecting games and systems for pretty much my whole life, and as you see behind me, there's quite a bit of stuff just like this. Sure, it's not like those massive walls of games like you might see online, but it still is far more than the average person realistically has. And for me, it's actually not about creating something to be on display. Every single one of these are plugged in and works and are connected to that single TV. And the craziest part is that everything is hooked up via an insane system of switchers and a scaler. The thing is that collecting retro games or systems of any kind is almost always a very similar experience. From roaming Facebook Marketplace, to going to conventions, to asking friends or relatives for stuff they don't need or want anymore. The hobby is something akin to a treasure hunt, I'd say, because there's always something new waiting to be collected. But more so than collecting, I love to try and make these systems the best they can ever be, without modifying them too much. I love to try and get the best picture quality, and make sure everything still works even after nearly 30 years for some of these. So today I want to share some insight into my setup and what you realistically can do if you want something similar for yourself. And besides, it's not like anyone would want to listen to me talk about this otherwise, so now you have to stay here. And for the sake of watchability, I'll try to not get overly into technical stuff. So, there you go.
Let's begin with a thing that we all hate: cables. Pre-HDMI, every console basically used an analog video output source, and what that means in simple man's terms is the picture was sent as a continuous wave, whereas a digital signal is composed of either ones or zeros. The end result is that analog video is much more prone to interference in different ways. And why this matters is that not all analog video signals are the same. Most people have seen these three cables: yellow, red, and white. These cables are known as composite and work fairly well on a surface level, though these actually rank among the bottom of analog video, only above a thing known as RF, which we won't talk about now, cause that's pretty much unusable, I'd say. Now, it's only when you connect these composite cables to a modern display that you really see how bad these look. Which is why we have options. Depending on where you lived in the world, you have a few different standards. In the US, you could often find a connector called S-Video, which was a major step up visually over composite. In Europe, we have this interesting plug called SCART that actually can carry two different signals, one of which is composite, meaning it looks pretty much awful. But on the other hand, the more interesting signal it can carry is called RGB. And that actually ranks among the top of the analog signals for quality, even over S-Video. In Japan, you have this thing called JP21, which looks pretty much identical to SCART but was wired differently internally, but essentially it can carry composite and RGB as well. While regional stuff like this is cool and all, the king of analog video was supported worldwide, and that is component. This was the king of quality, but unfortunately, due to the hassle of connecting up to 5 cables, made it not really as accessible as composite. Though a fun fact is that you can connect composite cables in a component input, and it will just work. Neat. When finding cables for unmodified systems, it's important to look at what console you want to connect supports, and almost even more importantly, what your TV or scaler supports. To go over this as a European, I have most of these older systems right here connected using RGB SCART through this switcher right here. Then from that into this, the RetroTink 5X Pro. This is a video scaler designed to upscale low resolutions into something my modern TV can handle better. In my case, it's set to output into 1440p, and some may confuse this as the game being rendered at that resolution, which is not at all what's happening. The base internal rendering will always be the same 240p-ish whatever resolution. It's just for clarity's sake so the TV can handle the signal better. The upside of something like this isn't just the upscaling, pun intended, it's that also it works as an HDMI converter, meaning I can plug the RetroTink into any old TV to play old systems in HDMI. Furthermore, something like this actually also allows for picture tweaking, such as adding filters to simulate the old CRT look, as that's what most of these games are designed to be played on. This comparison from my N64 with and without the CRT filter shows what I mean. We're still on the same page, right? Good, because things are about to get messy. It's time to talk about resolutions. And what better way to get into this topic than to talk about everyone's favorite era, the 6th gen. Now, when playing consoles from this era, there's one common resolution you'll face 99% of the time, and that is the dreaded 480i. Now, maybe you know of some of the modern resolutions today, such as 4K, 1440p, and 1080p. Maybe you've even heard of people calling low-res YouTube videos as 480p or 360p. Well, 480i is a bit different. What makes the difference is that I over a P. This is what's known as interlaced video and progressive video. The super short answer is that progressive video is flat out better in every way, and you should always go for that if you have the choice. The technical side of it is that interlaced video was the old TV standard. It basically saved on bandwidth by only sending half of the image at a time, alternating between odd and even lines, and this is why you get those funky jagged stripes whenever there's fast movement. Progressive scan, on the other hand, is what we're used to today, the whole image being shown at once on the screen. So having said that, as I said, basically all games for the 6th gen era was made with 480i in mind, which makes sense as it looked really good on a CRT. The problem is that interlaced video looks terrible most of the time on modern TVs, and while every TV does what's known as de-interlacing, it never matches a true progressive image. And that's why I'm here to say that all the 6th gen era consoles can do progressive scan video, but all in slightly different and weird ways. For one, the original Xbox is the most straightforward, having it as a toggle in the menu alongside 720p, but the GameCube and the PS2 are a bit tricky. Both have specific button combinations to press for select supported games in order to do progressive scan. But that also varies on regions, as for us in Europe, this toggle was often changed for a 60/50Hz option instead, which I'll get into later. But basically, for the vast majority of games for the PS2 and GameCube, you'll have to do some modding. Modding lets you force resolutions such as 480p, and in my experience, it works far more reliably on the GameCube rather than the PS2. But hey, that's the easiest and best way to massively improve picture quality of all the 6th gen consoles. Now, unfortunately though, you'll have to do some research if your specific cable can do progressive video and what you need to do in order to mod your system. MrMario here on YouTube is probably the #1 guy for modding stuff, so I'll link his channel in the description as well. Now, the final thing I want to note is refresh rate, which basically only applies to my European and Australian viewers, but still. Basically speaking, the standard for the US and Japan is 60Hz, whereas in Europe or Australia it was 50Hz. And the dead simple explanation is that games running in 50Hz run slower than their 60Hz counterparts. Sometimes this is very noticeable if the game wasn't properly optimized for the 50Hz market, but if done right, it won't be that noticeable unless you put the game side by side. But to give you the worst possible showing of this, let's look at Sonic 1. Yeah, that was a bit rough, but luckily most 50Hz games weren't that bad off. Still, an interesting piece of knowledge to pick up on, as modding not only allows for forcing progressive, but also 60Hz for us Europeans. It's not something that works all the time, and some games straight up won't launch when forcing any other resolution than the one intended, so keep your expectations in check. And now the final thing to potentially make or break this as a thing for you to pursue, if you're interested, is pricing. Now, stuff like this does cost quite a bit, I'd say. If you're like me and get specific high-quality cables, get an upscaler, and also components to repair or service the consoles themselves, it's gonna cost you. It's not something for everyone, but slowly building your setup, your collection, and your knowledge is something that is pretty unmatched. No matter if it's games or something else, I mean, the fact that you're building onto something is fun. Besides, if you're like me and do some soldering, bringing a piece of tech back to life is genuinely a heartwarming experience, and yes, it is as silly as it sounds. I have to give a massive shout out to the Console Repair Discord for having some of the most helpful people when it comes to stuff like this. So, after all of this, what do you think? Was this all too nerdy, or maybe in a way a bit interesting? Maybe you've got an old PS2 or something laying in a closet ready to be given a new life. When you think about the state of modern gaming as it is, maybe now ain't such a bad time to start looking at the past. Thanks for watching, and please do remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy this. And with that, I'll see you later.